Growing up, I quickly realized what a crock religion was. My clearest memory of church as a kid was when my mother or grandmother, one of them, punched me in the stomach while I was sitting in the pew just for calling the pastor a liar. I was 11 then, and they never took me to church again. And clashes like these with people who allow religious authorities to divide them from their own family, even when their authorities are lying to them, and who then feel like they're being personally martyred in the process, taught me to loathe arguments from authority. Religious authorities imagine that their biased opinions and their power to tell people what to do come directly from their God. In their Bibles, though, doesn't Jesus say that I have come to set a man against his father and a daughter against her mother and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law? So in their minds, when they cast out their kin over religious differences based on a barbaric ancient book, they can pat themselves on the back for their righteousness. There is no righteousness more flawed than religious self-righteousness because they think they have magical super authority from their God. Now, secularists know the harm of mixing church and state. Yet here we are, as a nation split 50-50 on whether to re-elect a man who is owned by the right-wing religious evangelical movement. He did their bidding on their last term, helping to put religious extremists on the Supreme Court. And where now would a case go that promotes the Bible in public schools? Would there even be any hope anymore? What recourse would families have if they didn't want their children preached at in school? And maybe you've heard the case against Trump and you want to hear more about, what Kamala Harris is all about. And I promise I'll get to that in this video. But I'm passionate about the separation of church and state, and I want to begin with that. So let's start with another issue that right-wing evangelicals like to meddle with: abortion, a woman's right to bodily autonomy. After Trump appointed 3 religious conservatives to the Supreme Court, they later overturned Roe V Wade, even though they claimed it was an established precedent. That was in their confirmation hearing. So all of them perjured themselves and technically should be impeached. But who's going to do that now? You notice the pattern here of religious authorities lying in defense of their alleged truth. So now many people are living with the consequences of that decision. In my state, overturning Roe v. Wade triggered an abortion ban. And just last week, a pregnant Texas teenager named Nevaeh Crain lost her life after visiting 3 emergency rooms. She was feverish and vomiting and too weak to walk when they turned her away. At the second ER, she tested positive for sepsis, a life-threatening infection. Because her doomed fetus still had a heartbeat, they turned her away, as she was suffering a miscarriage on the day of her baby shower. At the third hospital, they had her wait 2 more hours to confirm fetal demise. And by then, the nurse noted that the woman's organs had failed and that her lips were blue, and she died hours later. And she would be alive today if we still had that protection provided by Roe v. Wade. And she intended to have this baby, but because of judgmental evangelical meddling, every pregnant person in Texas is under the suspicion of lying to get an abortion. She was turned away from getting needed medical abortion because doctors face penalties of up to 100 years in prison and loss of medical license and civil penalties of up to $10,000 each for violating Texas's abortion laws. And her mother said that on her daughter's Christian faith made them believe abortion was wrong, even in cases of rape and life-threatening circumstance. Her daughter's name, Nevaeh, is heaven spelled backwards. But after losing her daughter, she said, "I know it sounds selfish, and God knows I would rather have both of them. But if I had to choose," her mother told ProPublica, "I would have chosen my daughter." I'm not here to pass judgment on people's religious beliefs, at least in this case. I'm here to tell you that state and federal laws based on outdated religious beliefs have deadly consequences. In the years after Texas's abortion ban in 2022, maternal mortality rose by 56% compared to the national rate of 11%. No one has any reason to say it will come as a surprise if Trump is elected and the extreme court strikes down abortion rights nationwide. Chief Justice John Roberts, often seen as a moderate himself, said after the ruling that the ruling was on state law, but wrote in a separate opinion that the court could leave it for another day to reject any right to an abortion at all. And don't fall for the phony and fake appeals by the GOP appealing to the supposed fairness that abortion laws should be left to the states. Vance said during the VP debate that the proper way to handle this, as messy as a democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions. Let individual states make their abortion policy. But before abortion rights were affirmed by Ohio voters, he helped the effort to try and block their vote. Besides that, what other medical procedure is there up to states' voters to decide? Should someone die waiting for a blood transfusion because the state's Jehovah's Witnesses drafted their religious beliefs into law? The answer is no one should die or suffer an injury waiting for necessary medical procedure because of any religious beliefs. And furthermore, Roe v. Wade was affirmed in the first place because the right to privacy to make your own medical decisions without state interference is a constitutional right. And why does this have to be said in 2024? And it's not just women or people of other religions or ethnicities. Religious conservatives have always been against queer folk. And some states are even targeting trans people as if allowing that 1% of our populace to have the right of freedom of expression and the pursuit of happiness is somehow the number one most important issue for every hateful bigot everywhere. I often hear an argument that these religious encroachments violate the Constitution. The point is that everything changes or is subject to change. The Constitution cannot defend itself. It needs patriots to stand up for it. And I mean real patriots, not people who think they're patriots, but who are actually unwittingly undermining the Constitution and the republic for which it stands because they've been duped by deceptive propaganda peddled by those trying to secure unchecked power for themselves. And that's why I have to make one last attempt to reason with these so-called undecided as well as misguided voters. Let's talk for a moment about reasons to vote for or against Kamala or Trump. There are more reasons to vote for Kamala Harris than just the fact that she's not Trump. Although that is already a great reason to vote for her. But it doesn't stop there. Unlike Trump, she actually has competence and qualifications. Trump likes to say that Kamala is stupid, but Trump is stunningly stupid. This is the guy who wanted to cure COVID by injecting bleach. And Trump suggested using a nuclear missile to stop a hurricane. And he said that the Revolutionary War soldiers secured all the airports. So Trump thinks there were airports in 1776. Trump embarrassed us on the world stage every day. Apart from being a pathological liar with a worrying behavioral disorder and his expressed interest in turning the U.S. into an authoritarian regime with him as dictator, the biggest issue beyond that with Trump should be that he is so profoundly stupid. Remember that Trump brags about his education, but his lawyer testified that he also threatened to sue those schools if they ever released his grades. Talk about having something to hide. And one of Trump's professors called him the stupidest student he had ever had. Whereas Kamala holds a Juris Doctorate. That's a doctor of law, a degree that covers a range of topics, including legal theory, practical skills, and ethical considerations, which Trump has none of, any of it. It's hard to imagine a politician with less ethics than Trump. Remember, this is a guy who told the Boy Scouts about orgies on yachts, to say nothing about when he bragged about committing sexual assault. He was found civilly liable for rape, you know. Remember when he was running the Miss Teen pageant and he bragged that he was allowed to get into the dressing rooms when all these underage girls were changing? And then Trump's been listed on Epstein's flight log 7 times. Trump cheated in the last election because he cheats at everything. He even cheated on every one of his wives. Melania won't even share a room with him. Remember when some degree of morality was required for such a public figure, because people would look up to the president as a role model? No, don't look at this guy, please. Trump is a criminally corrupt, convicted felon, and Kamala is a prosecutor. That's almost poetic. Kamala also holds degrees in political science and economics, which is actually a really strong point, because despite what Trump says, even before he botched our pandemic response, when he lied and said we had the best economy ever. No. His economy never did as well as our recovery under Joe Biden that came after Trump's disastrous mishandling of the pandemic. Right now, unemployment and violent crime are both at a 50-year low, while the stock market is seeing record highs. The inflation rate that soared all around the world during the pandemic is now back down to 2.4%, same as it was under Trump before everything went to shit. Now, it is true that prices are still high because the free market does not impose any sort of moral or ethical standard against corporations that engage in price gouging. So these predatory corporations are making record profits at our expense. And Kamala has promised to push prohibitions against price gouging. And Trump wants to impose tariffs instead, which would only make everything worse. Yet right now, under Joe Biden, we still have the best economy in the world. And Kamala's plans going forward have already been endorsed by a consensus of Nobel laureate economists. So we're going to keep the best economy with lower prices. Meanwhile, Trump's concept of a plan has been widely panned or rejected by most economists who say it would be disastrous. His proposal for tariffs, for example, got no support because it seems that Trump has no idea what tariffs are or how they work, but the effect would be opposite of what he says it should be. There are, in fact, only two things that Trump brags about doing during his term that he's not just lying about, but that he actually did. However, both of those were disastrous too, not something to brag about. One is that he underhandedly positioned 3 religious extremists onto the Supreme Court, who then all lied about how they would respect Roe v. Wade as established precedent until they took away the women's rights to bodily autonomy. That's something that Trump is proud of. And Kamala will restore that right and codify it into federal law. Now, Trump's only other dubious success that he brags about is his tax cuts that only benefit billionaires like himself and that raised the national debt by $4 trillion. And this is what we need to remember, that Trump failed nearly every business he ever managed, except for shell companies that don't do much more than launder money. And multiple analyses show that Trump would have actually done better if he just invested his massive multi-million-dollar inheritance into an index fund. In other words, Trump would have done better if he had done nothing. And so the economy will be better under Kamala, as it typically is under whenever Democrats are in power. But maybe your issue is energy. And Trump says he will drill, baby, drill. But right now, under Joe Biden, the United States is already producing more oil than we ever have before. And that's even more oil than anyone else is producing right now. So maybe your issue is environmental, in which case Kamala is your only choice. We know that a vote for Jill Stein is a vote for Trump. Stein has already admitted that, and she said and says she's cool with it. She's fraternizing with our enemies like Putin too. And she wouldn't even admit that Putin is a war criminal. As far as other environmental issues, you know that one of the first things that Trump did as soon as he got into office was appeal or annihilate more than 100 environmental protections, regulations, restrictions. The things like allowing industrial businesses or factories to pollute public waterways. That's allowed under Trump. And the GOP want to completely harvest the Gulf of Mexico of all resources. They don't want to hold anything back. There is no kind of conservation whatsoever. So that's what we can expect if Republicans get in power. Now, right now, our green energy production is eclipsing even the unprecedented amount that we're producing with fossil fuels. So how many more jobs does that provide? Producing all those solar panels and wind generators and everything. There's industry there and the other ways to do that. Oh, yeah. Trump promised to bring back all those outsourced jobs in manufacturing and so on, but it never happened, did it? Instead, Trump lost 2 million jobs. And Biden brought us back over 13 million. And the vast majority of those jobs went to workers born in the USA. Is there any reason not to vote for Kamala Harris? Well, let's say you disagree with her on the issue of America's unconditional support for Israel, despite the horrific atrocity that Netanyahu is waging against Gaza. A lot of us are on the same page about that. But there's two things about that. One is that Democrats tend to bow to pressure from their constituents. For example, Hillary Clinton said that her stance on gay marriage was actually further to the right than her supporters wanted or demanded, so that she had to change her public policy to accommodate them. We know that Joe Biden has done similar. He has moved to the left when forced to because there are certain demands that and certain behaviors we would no longer consider tolerable. I mean, we don't want a corporatocracy. We are about people's rights. So I have no doubt that Kamala too will bow to the pressure of her constituents and also her colleagues. Because Bernie Sanders makes a really good argument for what we should be doing instead. Now, the other issue with that is that the Republicans will not bow to the pressure of their constituents. If Trump or Vance are in charge, then it will be full-on Zionism and war, not just Hamas and not just the Palestinians, but Muslims in general. So maybe your issue is national defense. If so, then remember how Trump ordered a military assassination against a country we weren't even at war with, or a general in a country that we weren't at war with, and how he effectively gave three U.S. military bases to the Russians and abandoned our Kurdish allies, wherein thousands died because he double-crossed them. And then remember how Trump uses threatening language against our enemies, as if taunting them for war childishly, unless he can make friends with them and exchange love letters with ruthless tyrants, the kind of people that Trump wants to be. Also understand how important it is to our remaining allies and our own national security that we keep Russia from taking over Ukraine. And Trump doesn't understand patriotism or altruism because he repeatedly questioned why anyone would die for their country. What's in it for them, he asked, before dismissing our fallen heroes as suckers and losers. Is there any reason to vote for Trump? No, not one that is based on actual fact. Virtually everything his supporters reportedly believe is nonsense with little or no basis in reality. Trump supporters are afraid of wokeness, which is a colloquial term for being aware of the fact that certain demographics might face more socioeconomic difficulties than rich, straight, white Christian men typically do. Now, how is this awareness bad? And when did simple compassion become evil? Or is it that evil men both lack and hate compassion? Everything Trump says is a lie. And how stupid do people have to be to believe that 181 other countries are emptying their prisons and insane asylums and sending their patients and convicts over here? That's not even feasible. And yet so many people believe this. How stupid are we as a country? And one person in Springfield falsely accused her Haitian neighbors of eating her cat until she found the cat alive in her basement. And from that, Trump got millions of supporters outraged at scary brown and black people coming to eat your pets. So maybe your issue is immigration, border security, in which case you should know that Biden pushed for a bipartisan border security bill that would have solved that problem. But if the problem had been solved, then Trump wouldn't have his alarmist nonsense to run on. So he called his minions in Congress and told them to kill it. And they did. Remember the caravan of barefoot poor people that were supposedly coming to our southern border from what Trump called the shithole countries? Did you notice how all those stories just seemingly vanished? All those people, I guess, just disappeared when Biden was elected, and it was no longer expedient to keep telling that lie. Kamala will enact that border security bill and solve the problem. Trump, however, plans to shut down the border and evoke mass deportations, which will, for multiple reasons, crash our economy yet again and bring our quality of life down even further. Trump is a fraud, literally, convicted in a court of law. But let's not forget all the other crimes he has committed since running for office, including the statutes he broke that caused him to be impeached, when he withheld aid to Ukraine in an attempt to extort dirt on Biden. Trump has no qualifications and no comprehension of what he's doing. He's basically just a crime boss who has gone beyond his level of incompetence. Trump said that COVID was a hoax, and he said that climate change is a hoax. Any real-world situation that he can't deal with, which is all of them, he dismisses as fake news. He does that deliberately so that his followers won't know who or what to believe in or trust. And he doesn't know how to solve an issue either. He only knows how to complain and project blame. Everything Trump says about his record is a lie. He is more honest about what he plans to do next if he gets elected again. And that should be even more troubling. Have we forgotten how he tried and failed a coup against our government, wherein he tried to set himself up as a dictator? Fortunately for us, he is incompetent. Well, both, really. And maybe you think that Trump will put America first, but he hasn't yet. All his America First merch is made in China. And don't forget that Trump illegally received millions from China and the Saudis and Turkey and Russia. He works for them, not us. He sent Vladimir Putin COVID testing kits before Americans could get them. So he puts Russia first, not the U.S. And remember when he stole all those classified government documents? He shared some of them. We don't know with whom. We know they were uploaded somewhere. And we know that he's had a number of unrecorded secret communications with Putin. Trump seems to be following Putin's game plan, doing whatever Putin wants. And have you noticed how frequently Trump criticizes the U.S. all the time? But he never says a harsh word against Russia or Vlad. You know how Trump says he wants to make America great again? If you look at or listen to each of the details that he gives, it seems that he wants to make America worse than it's been in 100 years. Worse than it's ever been. Most of his own family won't support him anymore. Many of his former staff and advisors say he's the most dangerous threat our country has ever faced. And that's why so many Republicans are voting against him. They're voting for Kamala. And so should you.